digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're joined once again by Sanj Sarati and we have with us Nate from Skin Motion. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
So, Sanj,
thank you.
The last time you was here, you was with us in the guise of Hallucian, but you are now doing something completely different. And I would like for you to explain a little bit more about what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so about 3 weeks ago, I set up my own agency, and we're called Tiger Heart. And we are basically a digital design creative agency that specializes in new technology. I thought it was time, because I'd worked with loads of agencies and worked with loads of brands, been working within digital and technology since 1998. And I'd seen the cultural shift of human habit and behavior as, each one of us started to evolve into becoming, what we now call the new digital consumer. Some of the successes that I'd been part of, the Tupac hologram, the Charlotte Tilbury magic mirror, have been burgeoning, groundbreaking, and more importantly, culturally relevant. And I just felt that it was time for me to take the leap and, start to develop these concepts, for myself as opposed to for another company. The thing that I'm really interested in is just this relationship between digital and consumers. And I believe that, that there's an opportunity there because, new and emerging technologies, should be fun, human and understood. And there's still a lot of murky water out there. And a lot of the brands I'm working with are still struggling to find their kind of voice through what's happening around us. But, we're still in the early stages of this fourth industrial revolution. There are vast amounts of great creative technology and digital ideas that are being conceived, designed and developed and delivered into the consumer space. Technology is now part of everything we do. It's everything we see, everything we remember. It's exciting, exploratory, and for some businesses, very frightening. And what I'm trying to do with Tiger Heart is help those businesses, go through this new digital space with confidence.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sanj. Nate, why don't you explain to us a little bit more about Skin Motion, but more specifically about Soundwave tattoos? Because not everybody will necessarily know what a Soundwave tattoo is or exactly how it works.
So a Soundwave tattoo is a tattoo that is generated from an audio clip and it's turned into a visual waveform which can be tattooed and then played back using our app.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for explaining. Now, today what I wanted to talk about was this intersection because I find it very interesting that we're evolving the concept and understanding of what tattoos are and how we can interact with tattoos. And the Soundwave tattoo is one interesting variant of this, but there are also things like the electronic tattoos, which are being developed to help us to be able to control devices, for example. Now, on the flip end of this scale, towards the fashion end of this scale, where Sanj is working, you have things like Project Jacquard, where we're looking at yarn level manufacturing technology and the idea of being able to utilize the actual fabrics to modify the way that we interact with technology and also to control technology around us. And I'm interested in this intersection and how close we're getting to skin level. And I suppose each of you are coming at it from a different end of that spectrum. But I'm kind of curious to hear from you, Nate, in terms of your experience with Soundwave tattoos and the reaction that you've seen. One of the most common, I suppose, issues around these types of technologies as they get closer and closer to the skin is this idea of people being a little bit horrified by the idea of, for example, inserting an NFC chip into people's hands. There's been a couple of stories where various companies have introduced this, that employees have a chip in their hand and it allows them to, open doors and buy drinks and do all these things inside, smart buildings as such. But there is this inherent fear for a lot of people about the idea of inserting technology into the body versus having technology on the surface of the skin. And I think you are very much in that hybrid middle ground with the Soundwave tattoo. And I'm curious as to what the general response has been to the Soundwave tattoo and to what you're doing with tattoo technology.
There's definitely a palpable doubt from the consumer whether or not this is even possible. And really, it was an accidental invention of something that my girlfriend suggested would be cool if we could play back the sound from a Soundwave tattoo that I had done. And I realized that that was possible using augmented reality. So I applied some technology I was already using on some art of mine to tattoos, and the response has been overwhelming. I anticipated some interest. I did not anticipate the level of interest that we've gotten. And primarily the reason people are so interested is because it is a personalized digital experience. And in fact, it's so personal that the majority of the people who've contacted us are looking to get a tattoo where they can memorialize lost loved one or really someone who's passed away, and to be able to share. Like, tattoos are already so intrinsically meaningful, and they allow so much self-expression, that the ability to share that self-expression with someone in a way where they can actually hear the person, they can hear the sound, they can hear the song that that person has such a sentimental connection with, really is helping people to connect with each other more through using the technology and applying that to the tattoo. And so we're really excited. We've had to create a business around the idea of the Soundwave tattoo in order to bring it to the people all over the planet who are asking for them.
I find this very interesting because you're talking about something that's a very permanent physical feature once it's been applied to the body. And I certainly, my mind, the first place my mind went to when I saw the videos on social media of the Soundwave tattoo wasn't necessarily memorial tattoos, although it makes a huge amount of sense. But I was kind of immediately jumping to service personnel who, you know, they're away from their families for a long period of time, and being able to hear their families, you know, was an amazing thought. Because I think the example I saw was of a Soundwave tattoo that had a woman's voice saying "I love you" and then a baby's cry or kind of gurgle, and it was just a really interesting kind of permanent way of being able to carry those loved ones with you. And I can see how that would definitely transition into kind of memorial tattoos. But I'm curious, Sanj, from your perspective, when we look at the application of these technologies, and obviously a tattoo is a very permanent piece of technology, but it is perhaps on a par with the idea of the insertion of technology into the body. Do you think that there are going to be some issues that need to be overcome with that? Or do you think because of the fact it's a tattoo, by its inherent nature, we expect there to be penetration of the skin, and therefore it's kind of acceptable because it's already something that you do that is a permanent placement on the skin? Do you think that it's not going to have the same types of issues as the insertion of other types of technology might have?
Well, it's a really, I mean, that's quite a broad question, because, you know, we live in an era now that's very democratic. And when I say democratic, I mean the democracy of ideas and how people communicate. And what that allows us to do is to test things in new and exciting ways. There's a couple of cyborgs that I'm working with at the moment who are utilizing technology and building chips and parts that are living inside people's bodies or on top of people's bodies. And one of the chaps I'm working with is a guy called Liviu Babit, who is the CEO of a cyborg network called Cyborg Nest. And he and another lady, a lady called Moon Rebers, have developed different types of products that you basically place on your body or you place in your body, and they react in certain ways. Now, Liviu's product is called the North Sense, and what that is basically a component that you attach to yourself, and it vibrates every time you face north. Now, when I was at Village, I would always bring these really exciting and very, very revolutionary types of technologies to the table to discuss them and see how we can communicate them with the brand. And what I found was a real problem was when you bring something to the table to a group of people that aren't very open to ideas and new things, you get a reaction that kind of I found quite frustrating. So from my point of view, I guess I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but from my point of view, I feel that any type of new form of expression, whether it's artistic or whether it's an internal piece of perception changing, thought thought that you have, anything like that that differs to the norm, is always going to be put against people, or put against mass thought that is, that has an aversion to what it is that you're trying to do. The North sense, to me or to someone else on the surface may sound quite simple, but for Liviu, he wanted to explore the world in a new way. And when I say the world, I'm talking about the space around you. Every time he faces north, he will get a little, kind of vibration on his chest. For Moon, she has basically set up this component in her body that vibrates every time there's a tremor in the world, whether it's a large scale earthquake or a small scale earthquake. So to put that in perspective, in New Zealand alone, I think they get about 30 earthquakes a day. Majority of them obviously are small, otherwise those islands would be destroyed. But to her, that's how she's basically perceiving the world. So she's using her eyes, she's using her ears, she's using her smell, her touch, etc. But she's also knows when there's earthquakes happening in the world. And that's quite an interesting thing. It may not be right for everyone at this stage, but in time, as we evolve as human beings, as these types of technologies start to, are becoming democratized and becoming visions for people, people are going to evolve how they experience everything around them. And this is just a part of that. Cybernetics is just a part of that.
So what I'm curious, though, to understand, Sanjay, was, you talk about this reticence, this hesitancy, but do we think that this is kind of a reflection of mainstream consumers? And I say this on the basis of you're talking about the attitude of perhaps a room full of brands or luxury, brands as such, versus the response or reaction of the everyday consumer, if we were to, talk in those terms. And I think I've kind of said this before, but I'll kind of say it again, which is this idea that, in the 90s and in the 80s, we as a cultural society, we had this real issue with technology. We had this whole stream of movies that came out that were all about the evils of robotics and technology. And, the bad guy is always technology. And this idea that if we allowed technology to become part of our bodies, that was a really evil, negative thing. We had things like Terminator, we had, all of these very negative perceptions of what it meant to have technology in our bodies or on our bodies. But as time has progressed and we, jumped through to where we are now with technology, we're at that stage where actually people are very comfortable with the idea of technology on the surface of their skin. And to a certain extent, people are happy to experiment with the idea of technology within their bodies. And I think that there's perhaps less of a fear around technology as there was previously. And I'm curious whether or not what you're seeing is still very much reflective of the mainstream consumer, or if it is perhaps more just a case of big brands and luxury brands having a fear of trying to experiment with something that they don't feel that their consumers necessarily understand.
I think I'm sorry if I've kind of given off a kind of vibe that a lot of big brands and luxury brands aren't open to these things. That they are actually very open to these things. I guess what my point was with regards to, when Liviu highlighted, this technology that lived on him to the people that I used to work with, they were quite scared of it because they didn't understand it or they hadn't experienced it. A similar thing occurred when I told some people that I used to work with about these dinosaurs that have got AI in them, these robotic dinosaurs, and you can stroke them and they learn about you and they walk near you and they walk away from you. And people are quite scared, and this is a generalization. People are quite, they have an aversion to things that are very different to what they're used to. And that's just nature. I'm pretty sure when the cave people, and I say cave people, not cavemen, because I'm not a sexist. When the cave people invented the wheel, which was a revolution in transport, and also a form of technology. I'm pretty sure there were many cave people that weren't open to the idea of using a wheel. The same with cars, the same with, Edison and electricity, the same with the Industrial Revolution, new things, new emerging things that are groundbreaking and have a kind of apexial shift in the way our habits, change, cause discomfort, cause fear, because people are just afraid of change, generally speaking, not everyone, but generally speaking. And that's just human nature.
Okay. So I'm curious then, because I think perhaps people like us are in our own bubble. And I'm curious, Nate, from your perspective, talking inside this bubble of technology and early adoption and being willing to try new things. Obviously, a lot of the people that are reaching out to you and saying, I would really like to have one of these Soundwave tattoos, they're naturally the type of people who are open-minded because they're reaching out to you in the first place. I'm curious from your perspective, what you see as the next evolution of this process, given that people have already kind of shown that interest and said, you know what, I want to have this thing on my body, I want to have this tattoo, and they're open and they're welcoming of that technology within their life. What do you see as being necessarily the next step in the evolution of the Soundwave tattoo or tattoo or skin technology from your perspective?
So we've actually come up against a specific circumstance where there is a lot of disbelief from the more technologically inclined part of the market, where they almost don't want to accept what we're doing because it seems impossible. And I think it's the nature of the product and how it works. And it's been interesting to watch how they react in that way, even so much as trying to explain to other people how it's working and in a sense taking the magic out of it. And when the interesting thing is that when they do that, there are other people very quickly who are quick to tell them that they don't care and they're getting one anyway.
Yeah.
So I think the consumer market is already very accepting of the ability to mix reality with the digital world, and Soundwave tattoos are the first way that we've come up to do that. But the future of our platform will eventually enable fully customized augmented reality experiences based on tattoos. So, the short-term future within the next year will be 3D modeled augmented reality tattoo experiences that, as augmented reality interfaces progress, will allow a deeper sense or understanding of what someone is trying to express from their inner world on the outside, and the ways that we can enable and empower them to do that are going to be dependent on the interfaces of the technology. And also, we don't really know where the future of this is going to go long term, when the projection for augmented reality is that within the next 5 to 10 years, we will all have wearable devices which overlay the natural environment with digital information. A lot of that thought in the business world right now is being applied to manufacturing and medical and like these trusted interfaces that have been hardware for a long time and have maybe transferred over into being software driven, and now they're being mixed in a way that we can experience them. But there's not a lot of this technology that's being applied in a personalized way. I mean, I think you can see something like that with Snapchat and the face filters, where you're able to change the way that you look. And that's one way to do it. And this is another way where that experience can be shared among many people. So as the technology progresses and we're walking through the natural environment, our bodies will be augmented in the digital world with these overlays just as much as, having an implant or doing another type of cybernetic integration with the body is going to interact with the digital world. It's just kind of from the other angle, where we're trying to really, more than anything, help people express themselves and to really define who they are and what they represent further than what they're capable of already doing now.
So I'm curious, I have a couple of different thoughts that have come to mind that I want to kind of explore. And the first one is, in terms of this future augmented environment, one of the natural questions that comes to mind is around advertising, because I know that there's a couple of different people who've kind of come up with these thoughts about what the future will look like if it is an augmented reality future, and this idea of having constant advertising around us, having things replaced. If I don't want to see a certain brand, it will automatically always be replaced with another brand, for example. And I'm curious if you see a point where the skin level technology that you're using ends up becoming this thing that literally people become walking billboards, walking advertisements for whatever the thing is, because I'm curious whether or not you think that is a potential future path that you can see something like this perhaps going down, even though that's not the original intention of the technology. Do we think that perhaps we might end up seeing that kind of application of the technology, especially if we're talking about the use of the technology being inverted, so to speak? And if you are walking through a shopping mall, for example, the tattoos or the surface skin technology being used more as a marker, something that activates an experience with the physical and the device technology around them being activated or triggered based on what's on the surface of their skin. I'm curious whether or not you see this kind of almost like a variant of Minority Report advertising.
Well, I've already noticed that we have we're out in LA, and a lot of musicians have already expressed a lot of interest in getting their music tattooed as a Soundwave tattoo. Whether or not that qualifies as advertising, I'm not entirely sure. I still think that's something that's really personal to them.
It's their own music, I think, definitely. But maybe if you put somebody else's music on your body, that's slightly different.
Right. And we've been talking also with the few record companies about the potential to use our technology in order to promote their product also. So there is a short-term path towards using this technology for advertising. And I don't think that there should be any limitation on whether or not a person should be able to choose what their tattoo and their augmented experience is limited by. But I think that because of the nature of the platform that we're building right now, as far as how it applies personally to people, the focus is definitely less on advertising. However, that is, I see a lot of the augmented reality industry right now and virtual reality as being driven by business people looking for business models. And so they sit down and they try to decide, how can we apply this technology in a way that it will be useful to people so that we can use it to start a business and make money, which is a great way to go about such a thing when the technology already exists and there's a model for how to monetize an experience that somebody's having. And we're not quite there yet. And I think the reason that the Soundwave tattoos have caught on like they have is because of the fact that instead of sitting down to come up with a business model and a business plan, we came up with a product that people liked. And now we're kind of going backwards, trying to figure out how to build the platform and the model so that it will be a long-term product that people will be able to have. But I absolutely think that the amount of investment and attention in the augmented reality, mixed reality industry right now is geared towards business to business advertising. And, I just went to a convention in LA called VRLA recently. And of all of the exhibitors there were only 2 companies that had augmented reality products. And both of those companies were business-to-business companies with advertising products, and their augmented reality product was specifically based around location. Yeah. So it wasn't marker-based or natural environment triggered. So we're still getting there. There's still a lot of room for growth.
I'm kind of curious because I know exactly who you're talking about, by the way, in terms of who was at VRLA, and shout out to our friends over at VRLA. But I am curious because one of the words that you've mentioned a couple of times now, and one of the things that I do think is kind of interesting to explore in more depth, is personalization and this idea of, I'm not going to say privacy so much as the fact that if it's a personal thing and it's a personal experience that you're creating, and this is one of the reasons why I think that there's so much traction around this, is because you're creating these unique personal experiences for people that is something they can keep with them for a lifetime, essentially. Whether or not there are any questions or concerns around this idea that once that thing is on their skin, whoever has a device that can access your platform can essentially hear or discover that piece of content, that thing that is on their body. is there a way that you're protecting that content? Is there a way that you can protect that that personalization?
So one of the key features of our platform, and we explored the different frameworks and platforms for augmented reality to try to see if there was one that would be worth using and building off of. And we realized very quickly that none of the current platforms offer what we needed by creating personalized augmented reality experiences. The majority of them, actually all of them, are set up right now in order to provide one experience that's used by many people. And our product is specific so that each Soundwave tattoo is experienced by the person who has it. The only time that it becomes available to anyone else who has the app is whether those two people are near each other, and the app is able to recognize when they're near each other. It will allow you to read their sound waves. So it's not actually, I think in that way, the privacy is protected by who are you around. And in a physical space, if someone's going to be approaching you and holding their phone up to you in order to see you, you're going to immediately have the option to either talk to that person or walk away. So because that feature is built into the platform now, I don't see it as a privacy issue at all, because it's personalized through the platform. Moving into the future, as augmented reality interfaces become wearable, whether that's glasses or contact lenses, that's going to become a bigger issue. Do we make the content available on our platform available to everyone who is using one of those augmented reality interfaces, or is there a way we're going to have to introduce artificial limitations in order to protect people's privacy? Maybe the smartest path for that would just be, I want to share this with my friends, and then allowing, I can share my tattoo with my friends who are already within my ecosystem or in my contact list. And that way, I think in the similar way that we share our phone numbers or we share our email addresses, we can share our inner expressions
with the chosen few.
Yeah.
Okay. So I am kind of curious, because this is leading me to a natural question around this idea of identity and how people perceive their identity in this current age that we're going through, where there is this kind of personal identity that we have that is our physical self, and then there is this personal identity that people have that is their digital self. And that's most prevalent when we look at things like social media or gaming, for example. And I'm curious from your perspective, Sanj, as we move forward and we're looking at this fusion, this crossing over point, convergence point, if you like, between the digital self and the physical self, and how people express themselves and their creativity or their personalization of who they are, where you see that transition point in terms of the wearable technology, the fashion layer, if you like, in terms of clothing or the articulation of something wearable, where do you see that transition point happening?
Well, it's a very hard question to answer, because I don't think we can predict when technologies are going to hit the kind of mature stage. I wrote an article actually for Neighborhood a few months ago about that moment, and I call it the digital apex. It's when the kind of moment occurs where humanity and the digital world become one. And what I mean by that, where everything that we do, everything that we see, that we hear, that we live, occurs without. To some people, that may sound quite scary, because no one wants to kind of give up what's around them, and I for one would never want to do that. But it is a natural aspect of our evolution. There is this kind of obsession with digitizing everything, and ever since the digital revolution, since early 2000, there's been a massive source of data that's just been accumulating and growing. And that data initially started off with simple habits like, what website you went on, what you bought, what you shared, what what recommendations you made. And that changed when social media started to have a big aspect on everyone's lives, and people started to tell stories through social media. And that's changing through live video, as people start filming themselves doing whatever it is that they want to do. And it could be on Facebook, it could be on Instagram. The world has changed dramatically, and there's so much information out there that it allows computer algorithms and also very savvy humans to create these kind of digital experiences that we're all piping into, that we're all buying into. And some of that is, being kickstarted by cybernetics. Some of that is being kickstarted by AR, VR. Some of it's being kickstarted by, these types of tattoos that are being created at the moment. The key thing now is to understand is that with regards to data, with regards to, privacy, data and privacy, well, privacy's gone out the window because the data's already out there. People are already giving away this data. And it's one of the reasons why companies like, Google and Facebook know more about what's happening in the world than our governments. It's because they know, what's happening. They react to it very quickly, and they're becoming these big, huge, digital monoliths that are not in control, but just have a kind of handle on the planet at the moment. And to me, that's exciting because it's a change in the way the world is evolving. But the coolest thing, one of the coolest people on the planet, I think, that's really upping the game is Elon Musk. And what he's brought to this, to the world is exciting. And one of his investments, Neuralink, is a big part of that. It's an investment in fusing the digital world with our spinal column, and that's quite an interesting thing. And once we plug into the matrix, who knows where it's going to go. But one thing I would say, just touching on some of the points that were raised earlier, your privacy is already out there, and that's that's just the nature of the beast. But we still have choice, and we still choose to do whatever it is that we want to do. And anything that is digitized can be undigitized. And when I say undigitized, I don't mean, can be stopped. I mean, if someone is controlling what they're showing you, there are algorithms, or there will be algorithms out there that can stop that process. And a good example of that is ad blocker, which majority of people use on their web browsers.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to add something about the identity factor you were bringing up in digital mixing with the real world. And I think it's that with the personalized, you were talking about the difference between the inner identity of self and the outer identity of self. And I think to a large degree that inner identity of self represents the collective consciousness, and what we've been creating together as a group through the internet and with technology is a physical manifestation of that collective consciousness. And as the digital version or identity of ourselves is growing, we're becoming more in tune with the inner personality and character that we identify with on the inside, which is also tuning us into this collective consciousness much more, and giving people a way to express that inner experience on the outside really is actually a cathartic experience, which is helping them to grow, to understand this relationship between their inner identity and the outer one.
Okay. Well, as always, we'd like to ask what it is that you think needs to change, be this a cultural shift or a technological shift. But what do you think that one significant change is that will help to really just push things forward or change the way that you're doing business right now? And I'm curious to understand what that would be from your perspective, Sanj, because obviously you work across so many different things. But if there was something significant that you felt needed to happen, what would be that thing?
I'm really excited about what's going on now in the world. I think maybe 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, when I first started to get into the coding world, that a lot of businesses that we approach to say, look, let's build something that's going to be right for you, were very they weren't very open to new ideas. They had like a marketing budget, maybe an innovation budget, but there was never really an opportunity for us to do things. And what I've seen, and it's one of the reasons why I've set up my own business, is a lot of brands, a lot of businesses are open to new technologies, are open to innovative ideas, and are willing to, invest in the development of these ideas. And that's a great thing. That's an exciting thing. We're in a great space, and the future is now. It's just not evenly distributed. That was a William Gibson quote, by the way. But yeah, it's, I don't think anything needs to change. I think, people are open, and that there is an evolution. I think that the only thing that worries me is that it's always the last thing that they think about when we're working on projects. And it's always an aspect of a campaign. It's never the kind of, well, when I say never, obviously the Charlotte Tilbury augmented reality project that I worked on last year is a big aspect of their proposition, but that wasn't the case, 7 years ago. And I think, I don't know, I think we're in an exciting time. There's still a lot more challenges out there, but that's the reason why we're in it. If it was easy, then everyone would do it. And it's all about having the right skill set, the right amount of understanding, and also the right amount of experience to deliver these things.
Okay. And I think perhaps one of the things to add on to what you're saying there is that I think what we've seen is a shift in attitude from people who are doing these things to not necessarily keep doing them as just another bolt-on or just because you can, but I'm starting to see people doing things more because they want to do something meaningful, and because they want it to be relevant to their brand and their identity, and do something where it's not just about doing it because it's shiny technology.
No, absolutely. And the most important thing, whatever it is that you're doing, and whether there are risks, whether or not, the key thing, I've always said this, it's always about the narrative. A shit narrative is going to still be a shit what technology you use. And, the creativity story should always come first. What is it that you're trying to communicate, and how are you going to communicate it?
Okay.
Then you start talking about technology.
Okay. So, Nate, what's your perspective on this in terms of what do you think is that significant change that would really help to move things along from your perspective? Whether that's from an AR perspective, or whether that's from, a tattoo perspective or a skin perspective. What is it that you think will really change the way that people perceive the market and perceive what you do?
I think the biggest thing for us right now is learning what the tattoo artists are interested in doing. I think the tattoo industry has been largely like secular and followed a very rigid understanding of what was acceptable within the industry and what wasn't for, just about 100 years now. And it's only really in the last 10 to 15 years that has been opened up through innovation to new artists and with new exciting ideas, even as far from the tools that are used to the type of art that's being created, and even to circling back around to using tattoo as a therapeutic tool. Because even the oldest human remains, Otzi the Iceman, had 20 tattoos on his body, and they are believed to have been used for therapeutic purposes. And I think that is, the evolution of using tattooing as a therapeutic practice more as much as an artistic one is definitely the future in that regard. But for our product and augmented reality personalized experiences, I think the future is really going to be working together as much as possible. And really we're focusing on creating the platform to be able to do that, where the creativity is the only thing that is holding us back at this point. What can we envision? How can we do it together? And how are we going to get there? Because we're talking about an industry that's built on a lot of competition, and there's definite need for us to join together and confront this as an opportunity to give people something that they really want, but also to figure out how to keep expressing that inner identity on the outside as the core goal, and doing that as an industry of creative professionals who get to work with people on such a deep, personal, emotional, connected basis. We have the opportunity to really transform their experience of their own life truly from one perspective to another. And the more that we can empower the artists and our customers to truly express themselves and connect with each other, then everyone will benefit.
Okay. Well, as always, we like to give our listeners a way to be able to find out a little bit more about what you're up to. And we ask you to do that by sharing with us your social media handle of choice. So what would that be, Sanj?
So for me, you can get me on Tiger Heart Tech, which is TIGERHEARTTECH.
And is that on Twitter?
That's on Twitter and Instagram and on Facebook.
Wow, wonderful. And Nate, what would be the most relevant social media handle of choice for you?
I would encourage anybody who's interested to check out skinmotion.com. We're on Facebook at skinmotion and Soundwave tattoos, and on Twitter at skin_motion and at Soundwave tattoo.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you for listening. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd. Thinking of launching your own podcast? Speak to the GL Pro UK team, who handle all of our podcast service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you, and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk. digitaljamsessions.com